So we're going to talk about absolute value inequalities. So we're basically taking the two ideas we talked about already. Inequalities, we've done those, and we've also talked about absolute value equations. So it's kind of like a mixing of both worlds. So it shouldn't be completely new and have a new feel. But here are just some tips that are good to know. Hopefully you noticed some patterns earlier when we were solving compound inequalities, because remember with absolute value equations, remember we had to split it and we got two parts. So we would take whatever was in the bars equals our number, and then we set it up and we were like, okay, it's equal to the positive version or it's equal to the negative version of our number. So we had two pieces. So same idea is going to happen with inequalities, absolute value inequalities. So it works very much like compound inequalities. And remember, those were our ands and ors. And if you remember, the ands typically shaded in the middle. So if you had a number line and you had your two solutions, and they typically shaded there. I'm not going to say that they do 100% of the time, because they don't, but about 90% of the time, yes. Now, a OR problem, if you remember how they worked, typically speaking, they're going to shade on the ends. Okay? So the way, and it works beautifully how it matches. Less than, so less than or equal to. So the equal to doesn't change anything. But if it's less than in any form, is going to match how the ands work. So less than's shade in the middle. Greater or greater, I end up saying it that way because I want you to hear the or. It works like an or, and it shades on the ends. So I have a silly little saying, and I know it's silly, but it might help you remember, and it could help you a lot on ACT, help you to weed out some answers and just move faster through the math portion. When you see an absolute value inequality and you see a less than, you know it's going to be in the middle. So less than is and it's like the land. So if you're like looking out at the ocean and there's nothing but water, and then all of a sudden you see a little island in the middle. So that's where we get land from. So less than is and, it's the land. Okay? And then you've got greater is or, you soar. So think about a bird and think about the wings on a bird. They're on the ends. Okay? So it's kind of silly, but it might help you remember this is how it's going to work. And if that doesn't make any sense or you don't want to keep up with it, that's fine. You can look at the math, and the math is going to tell you what to do every time. So let's start going through these. We'll do one as a practice, and then you can go through and just, you can pause the video and get some more practice under your belt. But the first one is an example. So as we did with the others, we want our absolute value bars to be isolated, which they are. So first step is checked. Then we want to split it. So just like we did with an absolute value equation. So we're going to have, we want what's inside the bars, 2x minus 1, and we're going to keep it greater than 5. So there's a little addendum here. We're not always going to write the word or. We're going to write whatever it needs to be. This, you go look at your original. It's greater, so on this one we are going to write or. But just for the sake of discussion, look down at the second one. It has a less than, so on that one we're going to write and. So you have to write the appropriate term. Okay, so we're going to write or. And that's going to help us remember when we get to our graph. Hopefully, if you're thinking greater is or, you soar. So going to be on the ends, like little wings. Okay, so when we come to the second part, here's the tricky part. You put the inside of your absolute value down, and you're going to keep that negative 5, but you have to take your inequality and flip it. So we flip the inequality, and we change the sign. Okay, so flip and change. Flip this, change sign. Okay, flip and change. So, and if you're wondering why didn't we flip it in an equation, if you flip an equal sign upside down, well, it's still an equal sign. So That's one way of thinking about it. It doesn't make any difference. It's just equal to that one number. Okay, you solve these both out, just like we did in the past. So we got 2x is greater than 6, divide through by 2, and we have x is greater than 3. So there's one part. Come over here, add 1. We have 2x is less than negative 4, divide it out, x is less than negative 2. Okay, so if we're going to work through this like we had been before, let's just do it thinking through with the math. If you think about the math, you're like, okay, I'm going to have my 2 dots, and I want to put the smallest one on the left, and I want the big one on the right. And now, if you want to, at this point, you could be like, ooh, or, sore. I know it's going to be on the ends, but if you just want to look at the math part, you're like, x is greater than 3. Well, greater than 3 goes to the right, and less than 2 goes to the left. Neither one of them have the line underneath, so that's all we get for the graph. You do need intervals, because remember, we're always going to do interval notation. And remember your union, and then we go from 3 to infinity. Okay? But you could shortcut it a little bit at the end just by knowing, oh, it's an or. I'm going to have the 2 pieces because it's the ends. All right, pause, work this next one, and then come back and see if you got it right. All right, I'm going to go ahead and split it. I've got 3x plus 2 is less than 4. It's less than, so it's and hopefully you're thinking, oh, it's the land, so it's a little hump in the middle. And then we're going to do the inside. We're going to flip it, and we're going to change the sign. So make sure you flip and change. Go through and keep working. So if you divide that thing by 3, let's see if we can extend this page. That's going to give me x is less than 2/3. And over here, I've got 3x is greater than negative 6. Divide 3 by 3. X is greater than negative 2. The same procedure that we used before. Negative numbers are always smaller. So don't let the fraction throw you. It's positive, so he's the big guy. All right, now remember with ands, you got to see where it overlaps. So if you're wanting to look at the math part of why does it do what it does, and means we want our chocolate and our vanilla. It's got to be both of them. If it's not both, then we're not happy. So if it's less than 2/3, that means we're going this way. If it's greater than negative 2, we're going to come up and we're going to go to the right. And it overlaps here in the middle. Okay? Neither one of the bubbles are filled in. So that's just the part we need. You could have bypassed that by knowing, okay, and shade in the middle. Okay. When you get in college algebra, those are a little tricky and you might want to just check the math part every time. But for us, it's going to work out with and is in the middle, or is on the ends. College algebra, they start throwing you some curveballs. You do want to do your interval, and thankfully it's just numbers this time, so we have negative 2 to positive 2/3, and both of them are open. All right. So if you need more practice, then pause, come back and work these. Greater is or. To flip and change. If you forget either one of those, it messes up your problem. All right, subtract your 10, and that gives me a 5. When you divide it out, I get a 1. All right, if I subtract 10, that gives me 5x is less than negative 25. Divide it out, I've got negative 5. All right, so if I go to my graph, negative 5 is smaller. Okay, and it is an or, so it should shade on the ends. And let's think, less than negative 5, yes, I'm over here. Greater than 1, yes, I'm over here. Don't end until you interval. Okay, so negative infinity up to negative 5, and then 1 to positive infinity. So you need those, you need all 3 components. You need the answer where you solved it out, you need the graph, and you need the interval. Okay, and then you can, if you need to pause and work this next one, that's fine. I'm just assuming you guys are doing it as you need. So less than is and. So Hopefully you're expecting the ending. When you know it's an and, that's the land. We're going to flip and change. I just hear a little aerobics instructor in my head. Okay, so 3x is less than 12. Divide that out, so that's going to be x is less than 4. Yeah, I skipped. I didn't write that show of work, but hopefully you're good on that. So that'll be a negative 4. If I divide that by 3, I've got negative 4 thirds. Okay, moving on to our graph. You know you're going to have the two values. Positive one is the larger one. The negative one goes on the left. It is an and, so you should expect two shade in the middle. Neither one of them have the line underneath it, so we just have from negative 4 thirds up to 4 with parentheses. And that gets you basically all you really need for absolute value inequalities, okay? Y'all practice on Math Excel.